Analyzing the lateral cervical, let's click on Zoom Image, left click on the film, and let's enlarge it. And then turn that annotation off. Grab the pan image by clicking on it, and let's move that film right in the center. Now let's ensure we have all the vertebrae on the film. So here's C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, C6, C7, and T1. So shut off the pan image, and we will now click on the dot tool, which is in the lower left-hand corner, and we will start to place dots so we can create the line. The first dot I like to put is in the posterior aspect of the mastoid process where it meets the occipital ridge. The second dot, we're going to follow the spinal laminar line up to where that would meet with the occipital ridge. We then have to place a dot right in the center of the anterior tubercle and in the center of the posterior arch. Since there's a little bit of superimposition, I'm going to choose the front of the posterior tubercle. I'm going to place a dot on the top of the dens right in the middle and in the middle of the dens where it meets the body of C2. Now I'm going to put a dot on the anterior and posterior inferior end plate, and these will help create the feather lines. We're going to go down to T1, and the reason why we have to put a feather line on T1 is so that we can analyze C7. Now, because of the musculature within the shoulder, it's a little difficult to see. So we're going to come up here and choose invert contrast black and white door. Now that's going to make it a lot easier to find that anterior and posterior end plate. Now we are not able to submit any of your assignments in this view, so let's invert the contrast again. Now we still have the dot tool turned on, so end annotation, and now we're going to draw some lines. Go to the main menu, click on Annotations and Line Tool. Now take the top two dots and use the very tip of the pointer to go from the center of the anterior dot through the posterior dot, and we're creating the foramen magnum line. Make sure that you're clicking right in the center of the dots. Now let's make the atlas plane line. Left click on the anterior tubercle, go through the posterior dot, and there's your atlas plane line. Now we have to make the odontoid center line. Go right through the inferior dot, just above the end plate, and there's your odontoid center line. Now let's make the feather lines. So we click on the anterior dot, go right through the center, and these feather lines need to extend off the edge of the film. So make sure to extend them off the film. Make sure you're choosing the center of the dot. And using a mouse actually makes all of this a lot easier. And we also have to make sure we have one for T1 as well. Let's end annotation. Let's move these dots so that they line up right in the center. Let's move the line so it's right in the center of the dots. There's your foramen magnum line. Now we have to move the atlas plane line. And there's your atlas plane line. We then have to move all of the feather lines up from the end plate, the inferior end plate, and let's always make sure that we lift it equidistant for each one. So we can bring it just above the end plate. And the feather lines are going to help us determine which segment has gone most posterior. Now it appears on this analysis that C7 has gone most posterior. And how do you determine that? Well, we find out where the lines cross, and the feather lines cross closest to the spine at C7T1. So C7 is most posterior. Now this does not count because we only want to compare the vertebra above to the vertebra below. So these two lines cross the closest to the spine, making C7 most posterior. Let's go get the text tool and place a P, capital P, right on top of that C7. If we put the P in the wedge, we're analyzing T1, and if we put it below it, we are not analyzing any of the segments at all. To verify, here's C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, C6, C7 has gone most posterior. We can label these lines. Here's the foramen magnum line. Here's the atlas plane line. Here's the odontoid center line and the feather lines. C2 to T1. The next thing we have to do is we have to create the perpendicular odontoid line. So end annotation, and we're going to use the angle measurement tool. Start at the inferior aspect of C2 and make sure that your pointer is superimposing the odontoid center line. Left click it, completely superimpose it. Click again and bring that out to 90 degrees. Now it doesn't have to be 90.0 as long as it's 90 degrees. And as you can see, that is a 90 degrees. Now we end annotation and we go get the line tool again. Main menu, annotations, line. We're going to superimpose this line, creating the perpendicular odontoid line. End annotation. Now we don't need the angle measurement any longer, so let's highlight it. Once you highlight it, left click, it turns red. Right click, this menu comes up and we will click delete annotation. Now here's that perpendicular odontoid line. So let's identify that. End annotation. I'm going to move with the annotations closed off. The pencil tool should be clicked. And now I can actually move these anywhere I would like. And I'm just making them a little bit easier to see, and these are all fine. The next thing we're going to do is analyze occiput and atlas. For occiput, we compare the foramen magnum line to the atlas plane line. And if the wedge is in the front, it would be an AS, and that would be placed in the front wedge. If the wedge is in the posterior, we would go get the text tool and put PS here. Now, for the atlas listing, we compare the atlas plane line to the perpendicular odontoid line. And if the wedge is in the front, atlas has gone AS. And if the wedge is in the back, atlas has gone AI. Since the wedge is in the front, we're going to put an AS right there. End annotation, and I'm going to move this so it is a little easier to see for further analysis. To finalize this, I can change the color of the labeling of the lines. Left click, it turns red. Right click, change annotation color, and we'll go to a lime green. You can make it any color you like, but consistency helps. So now let's color the foramen magnum line, atlas plane line, odontoid center line, perpendicular odontoid line. And now we can change the actual listings. So the same thing, let's highlight the PS, left click, right click, change color, and let's make that blue. Same thing for the Atlas AS. And same thing for the posterior C6. And the lateral cervical is now finished.